Outstanding. So my name's Keesup Choe. Thank you so much for inviting me and my colleagues Alison Foster and Rochelle Fowler. And we're very glad to be here. I'm going to try some things tonight that I've never done before. So let's see. Let's see. Risk-taking in front of friends, right? That's okay. So very happy that this meeting was not on a Friday.
Just going to remove those, which I forgot to do.
Okay.
Sorry, ignore
That's okay. Because if it were a Friday night, I wouldn't be able to attend, because that's my wife's and our date night. Do you guys do anything like that? Yeah, married with children? Date night?
I did a washing up on Friday night.
So anyway, my wife usually arranges the date night, and usually see some sort of play, movie, dinner, etc. Right? So, but I think she got sick of this, and she said, "Well, this week you organize date nights." I said, okay." So one night, that night I took her to the Royal Institute, which some of you may know was made famous by Faraday, who gave the famous lectures, and you've all seen the Christmas lectures. So she was okay with that so far. And I said, "What are we seeing?" We're seeing a lecture by a physicist. And the topic was Einstein and the quantum. Not so pleased at that point.
You old romantic.
So, yeah, what not to do on date night. So, but it was a fascinating talk. And the thing that stuck with me, more than the fact that Einstein was actually integral to quantum theory, which he later disavowed. You've heard the phrase, God doesn't play dice with the universe, right? That's him sort of disavowing quantum theory. Anyway, so the fact that the transistor is basically, it works because of quantum theory. If it weren't for quantum theory, silicon wouldn't behave the way it does, and we wouldn't have the microprocessors that we have. And so anyway, he made the claim. Now I think my wife had tuned out long before this because she remembered none of this stuff. So it's Einstein. He made the claim that the world's the most important invention of humankind is the transistor. Yeah, kind of a bold claim, I thought. So I relayed the story to a good friend of mine, and he said, there's no way that could be the transistor. And he said, well, there's so many other great inventions. That's actually the first transistor ever made, 1947, by the way. Okay. And so anyway, my friend of mine said, well, how about, that's a fantastic invention. Doesn't get the credit it should get. He was drunk at the time, so. But then he also said, what about this thing? He took out this contraption. You've probably seen this stuff. I think it's called, what are they called? The vapor? So he was so I can smoke without having to go outside. And so I started looking at it. So what could be the world's greatest invention of humankind? Transistor being one of them. And it turns out there's been amazing and just fantastic amount of effort on smoking. Like how to smoke outside. This is all real inventions that didn't sell very well, by the way. And
It's good enough, isn't it?
if you're really into smoking, then that's one way to get a really big hit. Okay, but obviously, what's important? What's the most important thing about smoking, with which you cannot smoke? Is obviously fire. So I was thinking that could be a really important invention for humankind. The other one that comes to mind could be the wheel. So one way to think about measuring this and comparing this is to actually think about the rate of improvement. So this is the first transistor, 1947. And this is kind of a model of what such a thing looks like today. And it observes something called Moore's law, which is coined by Gordon Moore, who was the founder of Intel. And basically it says that the number of transistors on a processor doubles every 2 years. So this is a geometric progression. Okay? So that's kind of that little bit sitting on in your thumbnail. Okay. So you can't see this, but believe me, it's going up at an exponential rate. The scale on the y-axis is logarithmic. So let's compare that against fire and the wheel. So there's evidence of fire being controlled by humans 350,000 years ago at a temperature of about 700 degrees. Kind of not quite like this, but get the idea. And the hottest fire created by human beings was at CERN, which is 100,000 times hotter than the sun's interior, or what was it, 5 trillion degrees Celsius. Okay? But if you measure that rate of change, it actually, so 700 degrees Celsius to 5.5 trillion degrees, you only get 0.0023% incremental improvement per annum in terms of temperature. The wheel, that's the Mesozoic wheel, not very, you know. So if we measure the friction coefficient, that'd be pretty high, right? It'd be, wouldn't turn very well. Versus one of the most efficient wheels, which is on the. Anyway, the incremental improvement per annum on the friction coefficient at 0.07%. So we put it all together, it's overwhelming. So the rate of change of the transistor following Moore's law, again, I said before, is geometric. And human beings have a difficult time kind of comprehending that. We kind of like to think of things as linear. Things that improve and double every year, it's kind of difficult to figure that out. So one way to think about it is the old sort of story about the vendor who, instead of being paid in cash, asked for a grain of rice, right? And doubling on each checkerboard. And what happens by the end, by the very last board, you have a lot of grains of rice, which is 18 to the 10 to the 18th. And one way to think about that, if you laid the individual grains of rice end on end, you'd get to the moon and back 200 million times. So that's a lot of rice. Okay, so that's geometric progression. And this thing is fundamentally changing our world. So it's changing in terms of the storage, devices, the connectivity, and the broadband speeds, and the web is actually growing faster than Moore's law. And we're on the cusp of some really important and profound change. And one way to think about what's happened with the new technology, so you're just talking about, look at the year 2000. This work has not been done currently, but if you measure in terms of wages, to travel between Newcastle and London in 1900, it cost 1 month's wage. Right? And that's about a half day's wage, depending on the class you take. 3-minute phone call, 19 hours of work now, way less than 1 minute. 1 kilowatt hour electricity, 1 hour of work, less than 1 minute. 5,000 lumens of hours of light, 1 hour of work, less than 1 second of work. That's kind of interesting. Isn't that an interesting way to think about technology and the progress of technology? But this must be seconds now. I just don't have the study for 2016 or 2017. Now, what happens with exponential geometric progression is it seems like nothing much is happening initially, and suddenly the world has changed around you. It's almost like living in a house in stop motion and ivy is growing around you, and suddenly you go outside and the whole house is filled with ivy. You haven't seen it grow. So this happens at a very massive scale if the change is significant. So we're seeing that happening in business, in industry, like the dodo. So there are companies who've gone out of business. Their entire industries have gone out of business. I think some of us are old enough to remember going to shop for music at stores, record stores, going to rent our videos. Entire industries have disappeared. And the way this happens in terms of innovation, well, look at this one. That's a travel agency. Yeah. So that's a very simplistic version of what's happening. The way the computer scientists describe this, or information scientists describe this, are the effect of S-curves. Let me just go through that quickly for you. Is that technology one is a slow adoption, then it looks like nothing can stop it. And then it becomes mainstream. But while that's happening, technology two has started to develop. Again, you dismiss it, you dismiss it, you dismiss it until you go extinct. So here's an example, you'll get it immediately. Do you remember Kodak?
Yeah.
The leader, right? So this happens over and over again. It happened with our forefathers, hunting and gathering. Our Neanderthal cousins didn't adapt to farming. You can apply it to all sorts of scenarios. And where we are today, in a very sort of loose way, in computer science was the first benefit of computer science was efficiency, data processing. A lot of your systems that you use is about efficiency, isn't it? Care management systems, healthcare systems. Yeah? Next generation that we've been in for the last 20 or 30 years is content communication. That's the internet, the social media. Email, right? What was life like before email?
Peaceful.
Yes. All this can be abused, right? Yeah, absolutely. Now, my conjecture is that we're in AI. We're already in that zone, and we don't even know it. And it's profound. So it became right in the forefront, at the cover of newspapers, when AlphaGo beat the #1 Go champion. And this event, this result, even the experts were predicting wouldn't happen until 2020. So that tells you, again, humans have a very hard time thinking of geometric progression. At this rate, we think a computer can beat a Go champion in 2020. Well, it happened in 2016. But this put AI really right on the map, and the application is profound. So I'm going to actually share with you some of them today, and it's already there, right? So this truck is a self-driving truck. There's no driver. It's owned by Uber, and it delivered beer. There was a human on board to help unload the beer, but the truck itself drove how many hundreds of miles from depot to store. You know this, right? You have one of those? Isn't that fantastic?
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah. Now, and I'm going to, we have it already on our phones. We have natural language processing. That was the first AI research in the 50s. It just didn't work because we didn't have the horsepower. But now we basically have a supercomputer in our pocket, so we can do these things. So this is coming. And how is it done? So this is a model of a neural network. It's modeling in a very loose way how the brain works. Neurons connecting to other neurons and learning from iteration. Okay? Touch something, it's hot, don't touch it again. That's quick. Other things take longer to learn. So actually, I'm going to build a neural network for you. This is one of these risky things from scratch. Let's see if this works. Okay. So this is a very simple neural network. Oh, what happened? I need to get rid of this. And then, okay, here we are. Okay, so this has 2 neurons. And the very simple thing, what we're trying to find out is, can you identify and cluster the blue dots and the orange dots? Okay, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger for you. Okay, so I'm going to run it. I only have two layers of neurons right now, and it's gonna struggle. That's telling you. Yeah, it's not much is happening. Okay, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to add additional data inputs. Add 2 more layers and more neurons. And ask it to now learn. There you go. So this is a very simple example of just basically colors and placements. but it can be, and it's only 2 dimensions, but it could be multiple dimensions of any type. And without really much human intervention, I'm asking the machine to learn how to identify and classify these things. Okay? Conceptually, this is the underpinning of everything. That self-driving car, that voice recognition. Yeah? It's the technology that we use to identify data sets that are common, look for anomalies, join these things up. Before this sort of technology, it was done deterministically and with a lot of manual intervention. That's why, frankly, it wasn't really that successful. Now it's all possible. So, go back to this. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So AI applied to government. So bots, right? So in fact, the phone is the start of the bot, and that little interaction you have is the beginning of an interaction you can actually. So this one is a bot with a bank. I'll just read it. The bot is saying. So remember, there's no human being here. It's the bot saying, "Good morning. Any questions today? Yeah, I'm good through. Yeah, am I good through payday? Well, you have an $81 cable bill tomorrow, but that still leaves $328 in checking. Is that enough? Yes. Transfer 27 to rainy savings. Done. Your rainy day savings account balance is $992, up $127 this year. Nice. Do you want to add $8 to make it an even 1,000? Sure. Okay, it's 1,000 now, and you have $295 in checking. Anything else? So that's an actual interaction between a bot and a customer.
Wow.
So I don't know if you played with your do your children play with your phone? So
I only play on my phone when I'm driving.
So what's the population of Colchester?
182,000. Oh, sorry.
The population of Colchester was 104,400 in 2001.
Okay, but imagine if now is an interactive bot, and then that can say what has been the change in the demographics over time, answers the question, etc. So that's the type of interaction now you can have with the machine.
So it's 182,000. So in 15 years, it's the borough of Colchester. The borough of Colchester.
Semantic analysis. So part of this is also semantic analysis, the same sort of technology, which means I can read text, read a paper, read tweets, Facebook posts, and tell you whether they're happy, they're sad, they're concerned, etc. about any issue. You can have very long surveys, if you like, of your service users and understand that without having to read it.
May I just ask you?
Yeah, sure.
A question. Sorry, I'm intrigued by that. It's good. When you said what's the population of Colchester?
Yeah.
Does that automatically know that's UK Colchester or Massachusetts
'Cause I'm here.
Colchester? So it knows that.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
because
Still thinks it's the city, not the
The
borough.
town. not
I
the borough.
wasn't being specific enough.
Yeah.
I wonder what we'll say if I say what's the population of
So
Essex.
that's
I
also
haven't tried.
2001.
It's the latest data that it has.
Oh, it has,
yeah.
actually.
Okay.
Just one show there.
Yeah.
Wasn't there something about Facebook recently searching use of certain words to determine whether people potentially are at risk of major depression and suicide? Did I read that?
Agreed. It's gone beyond that. It's not just words. It's the semantics. It's the meaning of the words.
You're right, absolutely.
That's the big difference between what we have today than what was there 10 years ago. Was keyword searches, etc. This is now the meaning, the understanding. So even if I don't have the perfect word, it knows, oh, what you mean is this. I mean, it needs to understand a sentence that we would take for granted. You go to the doctor, I'm back today because my back hurts. Not so easy for machines to figure that out, right?
Can it analyse those in context rather
That's
than just look
exactly.
That's what you're saying, yeah?
Exactly.
So it can understand the sophisticated
Exactly.
context that
So-
that's expressed.
So where we are today is a completely context independent, generalized natural language understanding is, I would say, about a year away. So you can't say, Alexa, I don't know, what does my friend want for Christmas or something?
My children say,
Yeah.
Alexa, do you like me? Will you be my
It doesn't.
best friend?
It can't do that yet. I do not know how to. Yeah, exactly.
Just
So
to-
where
just
we
to
are
mention
is
Alexa.
context specific, domain specific, but certainly in terms of if Alexa were trained on medicine, yeah, I have these symptoms, and it will ask, do you also have that? Oh, I don't have that. In which case, do you do this? It could do that sort of thing where it's very bound.
But it's
Okay.
programmed to do that, isn't it? As opposed
It learns.
It's not AI.
No, it is. That's the whole thing. It learns.
Oh, right.
It
If I may on
learns.
the learning Keesup,
Yes.
as most people in the room will know who've worked with me before, I use speech tech in and out all the time.
Yes.
I'm a blind person. And I use different tech on my laptop to my phone.
Mm.
Your name is spell checked beautifully as Keesup.
Yeah.
So we're all
Exactly.
But I taught my phone to spell you correctly just by talking to it. And
Exactly.
You've been spelled correctly ever since, and I could now say email Keesup and it would.
Exactly. Well, that's what the difference is.
Yeah.
That neural network I showed you was a real one, and it learns over time.
So, sorry, if it isn't as simple, then just shut me up. So, in each of those little boxes, so in the
Mhm.
letters and things, were those kind of binary?
Those are probabilistic. Those are actually not binary. Those are
Right.
saying this event has 70% probability of doing that. And if that happens, what would happen here? And everything's connected to
Yeah,
each
yeah,
other
yeah.
as well. That's another.
But there is kind of a single.
It's probabilistic.
In each one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weight and probabilistic in
and
each
so
one.
the breakthrough really is the ability to flow through lots of that
Yes.
in very
Correct.
In really
So the human brain has 100 billion neurons.
Yeah.
So there are some estimates, again, I think it'll happen sooner, that neural networks will exceed that within 10 years.
So given the fact, sorry to interrupt you, this is
No,
fascinating.
no.
Given the fact this learning is going with AI, at what point do you predict in the medical world we no longer need GPs?
It depends for what purpose. I think, my personal opinion is you want a human being for empathy.
As we think now.
Yeah, for what do GPs do? There is I think that, for me anyway, whenever I see my GP, only a tiny portion of that interaction is about diagnostics. That bit, a machine will probably be able to do.
Yeah.
All the other bits of human relationships, empathy, etc. And we're not quite there yet with the machines, are we?
But it could happen.
It certainly is for remote situations or emergency situations, or where you're out of work, GPs are overworked. For it'll be more of a regulatory question of whether you will enable such a bot to answer these sort of questions to a potential patient or not. But it will happen.
And if you combine the genomics
Yeah.
with the AI, then the diagnostic kind of in the present and
Yeah.
it becomes, it's very algorithmic, which it always has been. But, there's then I may have a diagnosis of diabetes, but I'm a lorry driver, and so if you, prescribe me insulin, I'll lose my job.
That's right.
And actually you look a bit, I know you well, actually just look a bit off today. But
Yeah.
it could go.
I'm just trying to put our minds in those of, our minds of our grandchildren.
Yeah.
What conversation are they going to have while sitting here in 100 years' time?
This will be 100 years. This will be a reality in 20 years.
Yeah, precisely. So
Yeah.
what conversation are they going to have? Sorry,
That's okay. I think there is a human thing, isn't there? I just
Yeah.
wanted to say
Yeah.
that pilotless aeroplanes haven't taken off, have they? People don't want to fly in aeroplanes without pilots. And yet
But
arguably, the autopilots are better.
Well, most of the time the pilots are just
They have
monitoring
vested
the
interest.
They
machines.
did say the same until Docklands Railway was in there.
I'm not being entirely facetious, but could we use AI to actually do the negotiations with Brexit? In a way, because surely you can pump in all the eventualities and actually work out.
Yeah.
Well, it would depersonalise it. And
Yeah, we got a little earpiece for Theresa May, and
Can you ask them what the vision for Essex is?
so. But there's a lot more. So anomaly detection. So we do this now with looking for fraud for some of our clients in various different ways, even something like expenses. Okay, it can be applied to anything looking for anomalies. Well, it could be for asylum seekers, benefits. It could be for, you know, it doesn't mean just fraud, anomaly. So what's unusual? What's new? What's different? What should I be looking for? It's not just for fraud, although obviously most of the application of neural nets is for fraud detection. Process automation, optimization automation. We're doing some of that. I'll show you that, as well as data aggregation and understanding. So this is where we focused on. We're branching out into some of these other things as well. But some of the data sets that we work with, literally, you would have to have a human being tie these together. One way to think about it is a problem that a person can sit down, given enough time, and work out. Can a machine do that? And usually not, at scale. If you want to do that on millions of transactions, it's really impossible. That's why some of the problems that we work on really is impossible really to have done in scale economically before. So, in summary, anomaly detection, automated business rules, social network analysis, database searches, text mining, decision engine. So I'm going to give you a little quick demo of a few different things. Let's see if this works again. All right, so we did a little, so let's assume that we have multiple data sets we're working on and put it together. You walk in, and we're looking at some high-level stats. So left-hand side, so all the blue is sort of is the state as it is today. The orange is prediction, that the machine is predicting. So the first one is a service user spend profile of social care and health. It's saying 60% of the population is from 2%. The 60% of the cost is from 2% of the population, and next year's probability of cost overrun is 20% based on the modeling. Okay. The middle bit is we're only looking at individuals at risk of A&E attendance in 2017. The bot doesn't know how to spell individuals, but you can learn that later. Cost of predicted admissions in 2017 is 1.79 million. And the right-hand side is total fire call-outs in one quarter, predicted call-outs in the next quarter. Obviously, we could include police and any other data set, put it all together in one thing. You could talk to it in a bot. What should I be worried about tomorrow? So, well, you know, your call-outs are going to be higher. Why is that? Incidence of arsons going up. So now we can start drilling into these in more detail. We could start looking at the demographics. So this is combination of social care and health. And what this is looking at is and service usage by community, outpatient, social care, inpatient, A&E, 111 calls. And then by long-term conditions, hypertension, coronary, axial fibrillation, heart failure, and the number of individuals in each. And this brings it all together. You can drill in, get answers, get predictions. Yeah. Next bit is, we'll go to that bit. So this is actually looking at the population and identifying at-risk individuals. Each one of these lines is a person. This is anonymized view of a person, and then the demographics of who they are and what the condition is, and the probability that they're going to get readmitted. Okay? And lastly, I'm not digging into any of the much detail here. It's not the point. It's just showing how you bring all these different things together in one place. So hopefully this will come at some point. I think my network's a little slow. Anyway, okay. When it comes, what this is modeling is all the fire incidents, okay, arson, incendiary devices, etc. I don't know quite why it's not coming up at the moment. Lead source. Anyway, sorry about that. It's live, okay? We'll come back to that if we can. So, anyway. Yeah.
So what are the underlying data sets?
Yeah. So the health and social care is an anonymous real data from one of our clients.
Yeah.
So is the risk stratification, older people. I don't know which region that's from, but it's and the last one is a piece of work we did for the Fort Worth, Texas Fire Department. Okay, but it could all be in one place, which is really, really handy. So just want to conclude with a few thoughts. So this is a recent Harvard Business Review. How to manage the man-machine collaboration. So it talked about two different futures. So it talked about the fact automation is happening. So if you think of the 19th century, the gin machine and the sewing machines, etc., got rid of a lot of the dirty and dangerous stuff. Data processing, right? Teletypists, they used to exist. And operators used to exist, remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
The question is, what's going to happen here? Decisions? So that was the sort of the controversial question of Harvard Business Review, and they painted a picture that could be this or that. Okay, and I firmly think this is where we are with augmentation, that we're going to be using machines together to make everything better, really. And some, so hopefully I've pointed out some of the areas I think it can affect you. And these technologies it's there today. That's the other important thing to recognize. It's not something just in Bell Labs or whatever, or at Caltech or MIT that we're going to see in 10 years' time. And we're using this today at our company to build our framework. And we're starting with the data, and we're also building the bots and everything else we talked about. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And
Well done.
yeah, thank you. Yeah. Any other quick questions or comments?
Yeah. Any further questions, anyone?
Yeah.
No question. I mean, obviously, it just opens the mind to possibility, doesn't it? In terms of a fresh look at public services interventions, for example, creates a whole new set of opportunities for us.
I was talking earlier that in some ways you have a massive opportunity because certainly in the private sector there's a huge amount of legacy investment. And sometimes, because we work with some of the biggest organizations in the world as well. We work, Fortune 50 companies, and there the challenge is how do we write off the $1 billion we've spent on this legacy stuff? And in some ways, the same issue is with the NHS, the amount of money they spent on systems. And much like Nigeria, who had, I don't know, 5 million fixed telephone lines and now have 60 million mobiles, you can skip an entire generation of legacy technologies.
The reason I asked my question around GPs is not I don't want less GPs in the war, but when we plan for communities in the future, the way we put infrastructure in large part, it's not just roads, a large part of that is healthcare, primary healthcare, and other aspects. With this kind of knowledge, we'll change how we design those communities. So I'm interested that our grandchildren, will they think to go to a GP to make an appointment to see a GP, or will they use one of these things to be scanned, have a GP on the end of it who will then say, yes, you need this drug, and then a drone arrives an hour later at your door with a drug? Or 3D imaging, does it appear? I don't know the answer to this question. What I'm saying is that we are still thinking as we exist. How do we put ourselves in the minds of our grandchildren yet to be born, in some cases, and grow up, and what does that look like?
Well, unfortunately, they're already doing this. How many times have you seen young people go to dinner together, sit around the table, and all pull out phones? And I don't know whether they're texting each other or posting to each other, but it's quite comical. But But it's not just GPs, right? It's every public sector service.
Just
Any
click on that
question,
particular issue, but
yeah.
yes.
So how do I apply for social housing? You just are now talking to your bot, who's then navigating you through the process and making that easier. And even giving you, and in fact, some of these systems, the bots will say, well, here's the form you should fill out, and actually give that to you, so you click on it and it'll download, yeah?
Yeah.
And let me help you fill that out. These are the things that's really, that is available now.
I've been getting together our digital leads a bit, and certainly from the NHS and some of your digital leads. And one of the, so everything you just described is absolutely possible now, completely technologically possible. The workforce don't want to work like that, and the citizen will struggle a bit with it, but we need some early adopters. But one of the things that I feel is that we need to be quite bold about just making some of this stuff to happen here, because we can't imagine this future in any way at all whilst we are nowhere near touching any of it. And so I've been sort of really pushing NHS colleagues to be a bit bullish about not thinking I'm investing in this legacy system for the next 10 years, but actually just think I've got 2 years now, and I want to move us into the future so that in 2 years' time I can think, okay, so what is it I want to buy? Because I have no idea what I want to buy at the moment, because I don't even understand it.
How complex is all the stuff that sits underneath that example that you showed there? How much data is really in there that enables you to
A massive amount of data. And that's why one of the reasons it hasn't been possible. One is computing power, but also the data. You need the data to actually train these machines.
And where does the data come from? So is it in this particular example, is it sucked from different systems? Or is
Yeah,
it in a central
absolutely. So for instance, if you wanted to train a system to accurately, at least a preliminary diagnosis, say for oncology or something, then you would need a massive amount of cases to feed this. But it's now available, you see. It wasn't before. So now, like any sentient human being, it needs information to learn. So you have more information, the better it learns. Yeah.
So just I don't know how much you know about the work that we are doing on the Essex data, the work on the stratification, but I guess to show the NHS do have a very short view, and it's about managing here and now as well, because they end up managing quite a lot of the crisis and things like that. So using this technology, if I apply the real-time gathering data from different organisations to track and monitor what's happening in times of crisis, can we do that sooner so we can utilise resources? That happens quite a lot in the NHS, but councils have certainly local authorities have a much longer term view and responsibility in terms of prevention and prediction. So we're working with Essex on a range of looking at different predictive modelling. The first one is on predicting children who are not school ready.
School ready, yeah.
Sooner. Because we know that the impact of them not being school ready is not just on those individuals and their outcomes, but also the cohort of children who they share a classroom with and they take time with anything else. So if you can predict that sooner and can intervene, you can change a generation of that.
Is it with the, particularly mentioned the NHS, is the trick to this to get the practitioners using this? So rather than anyone saying, I think it's where we need to go, actually get young doctors coming into the system who do this automatically in the same way that young people now, as you say, sit there on their mobile phones. We think that's really not being productive. In their minds, that's exactly how they communicate what they do. Who's right?
So
Okay.
and there's a range of uses, so you can use it for direct care.
Yeah.
And as you develop people's own activity and pathways, mix that in with some risk indicators that you know that they have. When they come to you, you can start to predict, are they likely to access social care in the next year?
Yes.
What do we want to do about that? Are they likely to go into mental health care? What do we want to do about that? So that is coming, and that people are starting to use that much more. And that's the hearing that's direct care, and we are hoping that people use that more. And I think people are starting to get there. The data is although we have real-time data in NHS, for example, it's very rarely used in real time.
Yeah.
So we get it on a monthly basis, but in a project that Essex is doing is quite innovative, and there's a lot of people, particularly with children, so
Yes.
there's a real anxiety around being able to do with children.
We should share that with the LG, really. We've got some results.
When we mention it, we get, fantastic, we do it, what are you doing, and that would be fantastic. And of course the whole, cutting budgets, the whole conversation around it, this really hits that. We could really change a generation of outcomes by doing something like this, which is significant. So yeah, that's what it can be used in a variety of ways.
And there are, in my mind, quite a lot of social policy issues that sit around that. So, for example, you have the opportunity to change a life which you hopefully be for the better before it goes on. But there will be a number of different views about therefore what the right interventions. It's not that. I mean, a very simple example is that, okay, you take kids into care at a much earlier age. Would be one response. Helen, for example, in Essex County would say absolutely not.
Yeah.
Better to keep them with the families. So in a sense, there is a danger, well not a danger, there's a risk we need to be aware of about how does our policy development interpretation keep track of how that I won't say the technology, but what you're describing could offer us. So there's a lot of
Yeah, because it provides the trigger, doesn't it? But then the subsequent action is still in our
right,
So how do we actually because we may know it's going to happen, but actually we've still got a very fragmented system around it to respond to it, and our, practically our school readiness response in our care is a bit extreme, but have they got shoes to wear? Are they getting decent breakfast? They're pretty basic.
And I saw, so you asked a question about the data, so in Essex they've collected police data, housing data, health visitor data, more data the better, related to the child and the parents, really the household, and aggregating that to community level, so it's not identifiable. So that's where that data is coming from.
This might be a red herring, but I mean, just broadening it more broadly, if society is going to use the aggregation of data more and more, just make me think whether the kind of, old language technology infrastructure, which would probably be private sector fueled, is going to mean you're going to get more people wanting to live in urban areas than rural areas. You could imagine a situation where, because the private sector will go where the commercial opportunity is, which is around populace. I'm thinking well beyond now public services.
Well, you say that, but so Silicon Valley is, distance-wise, about 30 miles from San Francisco, which is about the same as Essex is from London. Yeah. And it's actually not that dissimilar with houses, and it's not high rises. It has a great university system and a very open entrepreneurial governance. One thing it does have is some technology behind it. So, I mean, these days, if you provide very fast fiber broadband to companies, it's a big advantage.
Point in the sense that only goes where there's a population.
So
no, not necessarily. They're
literally about 18 months away from being able to deliver over copper, which if we lost it to 1,000 is the same level of data streaming that they can over fibre at the moment. So that is another coming as well. So not having to replace infrastructure, just infrastructure.
Yeah, so I think it's a question of vision. I think the reason Intel and Apple and Google are not in San Francisco is because they wanted campuses. Right? And you can't have campuses really in London. You can have them here.
Absolutely.
Sorry, come back to policy decisions, which I read something today actually just came up around the right ones around the school. So the policy to enforce children's being weighed and measured and letters to go home so that they are less fucked all the time or whatever, that's not working. So every council is forced to make these decisions and it's not working. So it's really getting clever and getting the system right around what the kind of solutions around to. That's going to be the trick, isn't it? In the project we work, we hear that sometimes they know who a lot of these children are quite often, and it's about the right policy decisions and resources that they
And it's around the polish out, because at the moment, switch on our phones, we simply just put our fingerprint on everything. At some stage, that will collect data from us. It then comes to the question about personal information being held by whom. I understand that completely. However, what you're asking for can be done, because every child probably that age group is doing that. So there must be a way through technology to do it. The question will be around society. How do we think about that? Where our personal data being collected, who stores it, where is it kept, and who's looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a question society's got to get a grips with, because the advances in being able to help people faster will clearly be there and be clearly there to be seen. It's how society feels about it.
So it's the ethics.
Yes, it's the ethics issue, which is what you were talking about a minute ago.
I was going to ask actually if there are any studies around the ethical issue. Because I came and gave a talk to a big data event here about a month ago, and we were talking exactly about the power of big data. And one of the people there asked a good question about, they were concerned about decisions being made on the basis of data and algorithms rather than human judgment, because they thought that would lead to perhaps discrimination, and there was sort of racial profiling and things like that. And we had an interesting discussion about, are decisions sort of informed by algorithms, are they more or less fair than human decisions, and actually it strips out prejudice and things like that. But I just wonder if they're...
Yeah, so this is a massive topic. If you think of self-driving cars, so there is a, Rochelle, if you remind me, we'll send everyone a link to a pretty interesting game by MIT where you have to make the moral judgment on a self-driving car full of individuals. Either do you run into the barrier, killing yourself, or do you swerve around it and go through the crosswalk and kill whoever they may be? And they pose whole different scenarios of people who are... It's very interesting. If the pedestrians are flaunting the law and crossing on a red, you're more likely to run them over, it turns out.
Really?
Yeah, interesting. If you think of that, right? If they're obeying the law and it's green, it's a green man for them, then you're more likely to kind of swerve and kill yourself. Anyway. So there's some discussions about this, which is, okay, there's heuristics and algorithms to determine this, but maybe at the very last point of this ultimate decision making, you have a randomizer. So that it won't always kill you, or it won't always kill the pedestrian. Anyway, there's no answer for this quite yet. That's why we don't have we don't have a fleet of self-driving cars yet.
But these are decisions that have to be programmed in, aren't they?
That's the whole point, is do you want it programmed in,
Yeah.
which means if in a certain scenario you're definitely going to either live or die, or do you want to have some degree of uncertainty, as we do in real life, that at the very end it kind of flips the dice.
Yeah.
So somebody has to make that decision.
No.
Differentiation.
You have to build that randomisation in.
The randomizer is a computer doing that, so it'll be random at the very end.
But we do have to decide we want the hand of God in it, as opposed to a definition.
But Keesup, we were just talking about technology versus morality, and I just wondered in your world where that conversation is, because we can think of all great things we could do in the future, but actually where does society sit with that? Because I suspect society is a long way behind what's actually possible.
It depends.
And I wonder in your world where that question is landing.
So society isn't just single-faceted, right? So society is as much our children with the mobile phones as government trying to implement right laws. So I would say in general, in every society, the governance and regulation is probably a couple steps behind. There is no statute to determine this thing I just described. There's nothing in law that says the cars will behave like this. Nor maybe you don't want it to do either, because you're really then having politicians acting as God. Yeah. And is that what we want?
Nothing wrong with that. No, that's perfectly fine.
I think the phrase "a couple of steps behind" implies that it's inevitable.
The thing is, these S-curves are so pervasive, and that's why I think it is happening whether we like it or not. It's whether do we want to understand it, use it, control it, benefit out of it, or not.
But I wonder how many studies have been done on attitudes of younger people. We're the generation grew up with 1984, and we all waited 1983 for 1984 to arrive, and I remember that distinctly, the conversation about George Orwell and was he right, and the Big Brother question. But does the next generation have the same fears or hang-ups about the Big Brother state than we do?
Rochelle, the average age of the company is what? Would you say 26, maybe? About our company. Yeah.
20 something, late 20s.
Yeah, and if we took the old fogies out, it'd be
Yeah.
And are they concerned about sharing data and
Not at all. I think we're kind of used to this kind of abundance of data.
Yeah.
And,
So that's where the key
sharing
is.
is caring really in our world. When you think about all of the social, media
Yeah.
platforms, like we're used to, Snapchat, like we're used to, constantly sharing amongst each other
Yeah.
with the world.
So exactly.
Voters are different because they're not younger.
Yeah.
That's right, but those younger voters will become more interested. It's that so I'm interested in all of this because I think the fear of big data and who owns it will become less.
Yeah.
Not with our generation, because we're bred to fear big state, big government. We're feared the Eastern Bloc as it was and all that kind of threat, and we can all remember that period of time. Well, most of us can remember that period. Young people have no knowledge of that and have less fear of that.
That's right. There's a whole other topic for the next quarter, if you want me to talk about it, on another movement that is intensely concerned about this, and they're trying to apply blockchains to the social anonymity and controlling our own data, and in sharing only the parts of our data that we choose to share. So one implication is that each individual person can actually control their patient information, and is completely in control and has the ability to share or not share any aspect of it in a auditable way. And it's not held on the files of my GP or at the CCG or anywhere else. It's mine, and it goes with me, and it's completely protected. The same technology that makes Bitcoin unhackable. And there are companies working on this today. So at the same time we're all sharing this information, there may be another wave coming that says, okay, now we'll help you manage that sharing to your own personal comfort level.